Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive clash of perspectives on a company that has literally taken the consumer world by storm, Mart. On one side, we've got a legendary billionaire investor throwing down massive capital, fully convinced of its enduring fundamental business value. On the flip side, we've got intense consumer skepticism arguing that the trend is already fading out. We're not picking sides today. Instead, we're just going to break down the mechanics of this debate using the data and direct claims from both camps so you can see exactly what's at stake.
Okay, let's kick things off with a totally staggering number, 15.3 billion Hong Kong dollars. That represents the immense value of billionaire investor Duan Yongping's massive 7.65% stake in Mart, which makes him the company's second largest shareholder. When a guy of his caliber makes a bet this huge and consistently buys in when the price dips, the financial world absolutely pays attention. He isn't just taking a casual position here. This is an incredibly high-conviction bet on the company's future. So what exactly is he seeing that gives him this level of confidence?
Let's dive right into part one, the billionaire's big bet and selling emotional value. So according to Duan, Mart isn't just in the business of selling plastic toys. He believes they've got this top-tier business model built entirely on selling what he calls emotional value or spiritual value. What does that actually mean? Well, practically, it means satisfying psychological needs in a way that drives insanely high purchase frequency, even though the item itself isn't a strict necessity. People aren't buying these because they need them to survive. They're buying them for the thrill, the joy of the unboxing, and that connection to the IP. Duan believes this makes it an elite business structure.
And behind all that emotional value, a highly lucrative financial engine. We are talking a gross margin of over 60% and a net margin exceeding 30%. Those are phenomenal numbers. You see, when you successfully sell emotional value, you aren't boxed in by the strict pricing limits of everyday commodity goods. The incredible profitability here is the direct result of consumers being willing to pay a premium for that psychological hit. It's this financial reality that really anchors Duan's bullish thesis.
Moving right along to part two, the Steve Jobs comparison.
All right, this brings us to a really bold claim that might raise a few eyebrows, and it sets up a direct clash between the billionaire's thesis and pragmatic consumer reality. Duan actually compares Mart's founder Wang Ning to a business world Steve Jobs. Now, managing a vast array of IP and the crazy logistics of a blind box empire is notoriously difficult, but Duan praises Wang Ning for being incredibly sober, clear-headed, extremely restrained, and super far-sighted. He even goes as far as to say Wang Ning's temperament in handling this complex model is more stable than the legendary Apple founder. Duan sees Mart crossing market cycles and succeeding globally under this kind of leadership.
But here is where the consumer skeptic pushes back, and they do it brilliantly. They point out a simple truth. People can leave Mart, they can't leave Apple. This really highlights the fundamental flaw the bears see in the comparison. Apple revolutionized the smartphone era, right? They created a product that's an absolute necessity for modern life. Blind boxes, no matter how emotionally satisfying, are totally optional. You just can't compare the absolute necessity of a smartphone to a discretionary toy. If budgets get tight, Mart is going to be one of the very first things people just choose to drop.
And that takes us perfectly into part three, the consumer skepticism.
So, this bear case systematically dismantles the idea of invincible emotional value based on some harsh ground-level realities. First off, they argue that all toys are essentially fads. Look at Ultraman cards, massively popular for over 20 years, but eventually the hype dies out. They predict Mart has at best a 30-year life cycle before irrelevance. Plus, the US market is apparently already cooling off. Even more concerning, the core female demographic in domestic markets is reportedly shifting away. A huge driving force for that exodus is the price tag. Shelling out over $20 for a blind box where the outcome is pure luck is increasingly seen as way too expensive and just unrewarding.
Which brings us to a major alternative threat. The skeptic emphasizes that consumers aren't necessarily stopping their toy purchases altogether, they're just pivoting to cheaper options, often called B or Baozi toys, basically alternative blind bags and plushies. There's a critical shift happening in consumer psychology here. These cheaper alternatives give people highly desired aesthetically pleasing items, like gliders, without forcing them to rely purely on an expensive gamble. The reality is, people get tired of looking at expensive Mart figures after a few days, especially when these cheaper options guarantee a better aesthetic reward without the high-stakes luck element.
Now for part four, the ultimate benchmark, Mart versus Moutai.
Let's see how all this builds into the ultimate business showdown against China's most legendary and stable stock. In the Chinese investment world, Moutai is the gold standard for a dominant, stable, high-margin business. Now, Dewan boldly asserts that Pop Mart's growth rate is actually going to outpace Mutai over the next decade. He sees Pop Mart crossing market cycles globally. But the skeptic? They completely disagree. The bear argues that Mutai is inherently the superior, more stable model. Pop Mart might have high margins driven by IP, sure, but Mutai has even higher margins, stronger product longevity, and an unparalleled level of certainty that a discretionary toy company just cannot match. For the skeptic, stability wins every single time.
Which leaves us with one final high-stakes question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. In the long run, whose logic actually wins out? Do you side with the billionaire, betting that emotional value and stellar management will forge a multi-generational cycle-crossing global brand? Or do you side with the ground-level consumer skeptic, betting on the undeniable reality of toy fads, shifting demographics, and the pragmatic pivot to cheaper alternatives? It is literally a $15.3 billion debate, and the next few years are going to show us exactly which thesis was right. Thanks for hanging out with me for this deep dive. Hopefully it helped clear up the fascinating mechanics behind this massive market disagreement,